Alright, welcome back to my channel, and it's time to check out the bike I've been riding for a little while now, which is this 2022 Rocky Mountain Altitude. So before we get into it, a couple of things to note. I am not an elite rider, I am just a regular rider, but I am super picky about the components that I run, and I also pretty much can't ride my bike unless it's feeling good. So that'll give you a bit of a flavour for the intention of this bike check. These are also just my opinions. I don't have any sponsors or anything like that, and the stuff I run here is just stuff that I've chosen to buy myself. So starting with the bike, and it's got a 170mm fork and 160mm of travel in the rear. It is a horse link design, which is just a pretty standard 4-bar arrangement, and it's quite progressive in that it works with both air and coil shock. It's a full carbon frame, and it has 2 geometry adjustments, one in the chainstay and a 9-position chip at the shock mount. You can also buy a different forward shock mount if you want to run it in a mullet. This is a full 29er, how I've got it set up now. And subjective, I know, but I think it looks great. And I had some friends tell me that if I had told them I was buying a pink bike and I was going to put orange forks on it, that they did not think it would look this good. But yeah, I think it's a real head turner. So out of all the bikes out there, why did I choose this one? Well, I had been riding around on a Norco Range and a Norco Sight, and there was a fair bit of overlap between those two bikes, but I like certain characteristics of both of them. So the Sight, it really pedaled quite well, it wasn't too heavy, and it changed direction quite well, it was quite agile. While the Range, it was really good in the chunk, and I really liked the way that that rear suspension took the big hits. I was looking to get both of those characteristics in the one bike, and that's pretty much where I think I've landed with the Altitude here. So let's get into the bike check. First of all, I'm 6 foot tall and I'm riding a size large, which is a 480mm reach. I find that reach number is just about spot on for me. I could go a little bit longer and I probably wouldn't want to go too much shorter, but it's feeling pretty good on this bike, and my Range before it was also a 480mm reach. Starting off with the frame, there's a few things I really like about it. First of all, I haven't had a bike with fully internal cable routing in a while. It's really nice just to be able to push the cables in and they just pop out at the head tube. It also allows you to set your brakes up either style. So here in Australia, we run our rear brake on the left. With the Rocky, that means you've got the option to bring it out the right-hand side. On some frames like Santa Cruz, you have to have it come out the left-hand side, which means a pretty tight bend if you're going to run it on the left side of the handlebar. So that's a neat feature. There's not too many brands that do that. There's plenty of frame protection, so it's got this kind of sine wave chainstay protector. I still get a bit of chain slap. I thought it would be more quiet, but it's really well protected, and it's got a neat little shelf to rest the chain on when you're putting the rear wheel in, which is a nice touch. It's got an integrated 1-up chain guide, so that's actually part of the frame, and that just bolts on. That was the chain guide I was running, so that's really neat. And then lastly, I'm finding the bike pretty easy to work on. All the hardware is accessible. There's no nuts or spacers or anything like that, so you don't need 3 hands when you're working on it. Okay, we'll get into a bit of how I got it set up, and I'm running in position 3 on the Ride 9 chip. So that is reasonably slack, and it's the least progressive of the Ride 9 positions. Also experimented with position 2, which is slightly more progressive, pretty similar angles. And then for the chainstay, I've got it in the long position. I have run it in the short position previously. They're both good. For now, on this size large, the 448mm chainstay, that feels pretty good for me. The difference in the chainstays is pretty big actually. When you've got it in the short chainstay, it really sort of whips around corners as you'd expect, and then it slightly changes sort of how the bike feels when you're pumping into compressions. I think that's just from the shorter wheelbase. And then the long wheelbase is more stable. It's really good in big open turns. It's a little bit harder to get around those tight turns, but I'm generally just finding that if I'm on my game, the long chainstay, I can get it around corners just fine, and then the benefits of the longer chainstay being more stable elsewhere kind of outweigh the negatives of it. And then the last geometry adjustment I've made is not one that comes out of the box, which is I'm running a wolf tooth 1° angle set, minus 1° angle set, and that's giving me around a 64° head angle, which is what the Sight was, and I find that to be pretty much spot on for enduro riding. I've got some experience with angle sets in the past and I absolutely hated them. I had one on my Ripmo and it just creaked constantly, but Wolftooth have brought out a really great headset. I think the quality of the headset is as good as the Chris King's or the Cane Creek 110 that I had been running, but obviously it gives you that 1° of adjustment. Up front, I'm running the Fox 38. I've been on that fork for quite a while. It feels really good. I noticed the extra stiffness over the 36. I don't know if that makes me any faster or even if it's worth the extra weight. I think it's about 250 grams heavier than a 36, but I definitely like how it tracks, and I've just found it to be pretty consistent. At the rear, currently running the X2 Air. I've also got a DH X2 coil. They're both good. I find the Air is actually the more stable out of the two, while the coil, it's a bit more of an active ride, a bit more of a wild ride actually. Haven't quite sort of nailed the settings on that, I think. So running the X2 Air at the moment, again, that one's just been rebuilt because it exploded, because that's what X2s do. I'm running it with 0 volume spaces, so that gives you an idea of how progressive this frame is, and I've got the high-speed compression fully open. Moving on to the cockpit, and I'm running my favorite 1UP carbon handlebars. They're a 35mm rise, but recently I've cut them down from 780mm to 760mm. I just did that to be a little bit more nimble and be able to get through the trees a bit more, and I found that it actually reduced arm pump as well. Now, one thing I didn't change was where my levers were positioned. So I noticed in videos that my hands weren't right on the edge of the bars, and I could actually cut down the bars without really losing any width from where my hands were. And then all that I've really done is increase clearance there, so that's been a pretty good change. Another change I've made recently is to go to a 40mm stem from a 50mm stem. I thought I would want a bit more reach in this bike, but I kind of found that with the 40, moving my weight back made me feel more centered, especially with that longer chainstay. And then it's a bit better for charging kind of steep stuff or rough stuff. I've been raising my bars up a fair bit as well. With the longer chainstay, I don't really feel like there's a downside to raising the handlebars. Usually when you raise the handlebars, the front can get a bit vague. You can sometimes drop the bike and wash out the front, but at least with the long chainstay, that puts more weight on the front wheel and that risk becomes less. So I think, you know, it's all just kind of working together, and if you were to make one change, you might need to make a change somewhere else for the bike to feel the same. That's feeling like a really good balance for me. I've gone back and forth a few times with these different settings, and I keep coming back to this one as my kind of most preferred for most riding. Another new thing for me are the TRP brakes. I have been running Shimano's for a really long time, and yeah, I just wanted to try something different, really. I looked at a lot of the options out there, and kind of my must-haves, I wanted mineral oil and I wanted a good bleed procedure. So Shimano's obviously with the little pot, they've got a really nice bleed, and you can just do it like a lever bleed if you don't have too much time to get them feeling good. The TRPs do all of that, and then they've got a few benefits, one of which is a little bit more modulation compared to the Shimano's. They've still got plenty of power though. Another benefit is that the rotors are thicker. I was just keep warping and bending the Shimano rotors, and it was driving me bananas. That's not to say these haven't warped, because they have, but they're running a bit more true than the Shimano. The other benefit is just they're incredibly consistent, so the bite point never moves. Another new thing for me is I switched carbon wheels. I had some experience with carbon wheels a few years ago. I liked them at first, and I was running, it was an Aussie brand, but they were a Chinese carbon rim. I bought another pair of them because I thought they were great, and the new pair I just kept breaking, so I think they changed something with their supplier, or maybe with the layup. So I switched to alloys, and I've been pretty happy with them ever since. What made me go back to carbon was a couple of things. These We Are ones have a really great warranty, so if you do break one, they replace it for free. They're also really good quality, and they're very strong. They've got a huge bead on them, so I think they'll be less likely to crack if they do contact a rock. And then lastly, I got a bunch of flats last year, and I was experimenting with kind of different tire casing combinations, and I ended up just sticking a Cushcore Pro in the back. Once I did that, I stopped getting rim strikes, so I felt like I could go to carbon, I'd have more reliability, and that's basically what I found. So always running Cushcore Pro in the back. There's a few other benefits to the carbon rims, so way less maintenance. They're still running as straight as when they were new, and the spokes are all tensioned. With alloys, you know, you get a few dings, the spokes come loose, they go out of they go out of straight a lot more easily. And then I've gone all out, and I've got Chris King hubs. So I've always wanted these Burt Reynolds Chris King hubs, and I was able to get a set, and yeah, super happy with them so far. Nothing sort of too special going on with the drivetrain, XTR shifter, XT derailleur. One change I've made on this bike, it's got a really low bottom bracket, so I was striking pedals a lot, particularly when running a bit more sag, and I've gone to a 165mm crank. That's been mostly positive. You do notice that it is a little bit harder to push than a 170, but I got used to that in probably like a ride or two, and just the benefit in being able to pedal over kind of chunky rocks and that sort of thing, have a bit more clearance, is really good. For the same reason I've switched to the XT SPD pedals. I was running Saints, but yeah, just a bit more clearance, less chance of striking them. It's just a bit of a racier setup, and a bit lighter, I guess. Cool. A couple other things. So 1UP 210 dropper post. I had to get a new dropper for this bike because it's a 30.9 seat post. It's nice having the extra 10mm of drop, and it's been really reliable, unlike some other posts. Sitting on that is the Ergon saddle, and I was running the Ergon G1 Slim grips as well, so kind of matching the contact points, I guess. The G1s are super good. They give you a little bit extra width, so when I was saying that I'm running a 760 wide cockpit, it's actually more like 770 with these grips on, because they've got this kind of taper to them. The compound's really nice. I find them quite long wearing, though these are starting to wear out a bit. Finally, awesome wrap job by NOMB Bike Armor. I took this to Nate before I built the bike up, and I'd always done my own wraps and I'm okay at it, but it wasn't worth my time this time around. I'm glad I did, because the job he did on it is just way better than I could have done. And I think for the price, like, I would never do my own wrap again. So yeah, big thumbs up to Nate at NOMB, and he did it on a public holiday as well, which is really nice of him, so props to that guy. I will do like, I guess, a review or a ride impressions. I was going to do a first ride, but I think the ship sailed on that one. How I'm finding it so far, I did struggle a bit when I got it, mostly around the suspension. Went back and forth with some different tunes. This was on the coil shock. Oh, torque feels like shit. And then when I got the air shock, that started to improve. I think that's just a case with race bikes. I don't think they've got a very wide window like some of the other bikes. The Range, for example, had an incredibly wide window. I could run a 550 spring on that or a 500 spring. They both felt great. I could run the fork hard, the fork soft. It felt great. This bike is really, really great in the rough stuff and on the big hits, which I wasn't kind of expecting it to be as good, because it's a fairly light frame. I don't feel like I've actually lost much capability compared to the Range when things get really rough. The Range did smooth things out a bit more because of the high pivot suspension design, but this bike has very low pedal kickback, and that makes it quite smooth as well. So that was a nice surprise at how hard you can charge and how big a hit you can do on a bike this light. So a couple of quick comparisons, as I'm sure people would be interested in that. Compared to the Sight, the Sight's got a better pedaling position, and it generally pedals better. This has got a, I think, 76-degree seat angle. The Sight's more like 77, 78. That just makes you more upright. It's more comfortable, particularly when you're going up steep stuff, compared with this. Not terrible. You can see I've got the saddle pretty far forward, but yeah, the Sight is a better pedaler because of that. There's a really different feel. Even though the geometries are very similar, there's a different feel to the bikes on the trail. They're both quite flexy in the rear end, but the Sight has more of a dead feeling to it, so it has a lot of grip, but maybe some of that energy you put in kind of gets dissipated, while this, I feel like it kind of returns it to you. So if you load this bike up in a corner, it will flex, but then it will kind of fire you out the other side. And that goes the same for pedaling. I think when you're putting your pedal strokes in, yeah, it flexes around a little bit, but yeah, it just has a different feeling. It rebounds a bit more. And compared to the Sight, this Altitude has a longer chainstay in the position that I'm running it in, so that adds a bit of stability. And then when things are fast and rough, this is a better bike than the Sight. It stays more composed, takes the big hits better, recovers better, less chatter, less feedback through your pedals. Compared to the Range is stiffer, more sturdy. Obviously, looking at it, it's a lot more bike. The Range also has better pedaling position because of that steeper seat angle, but then this is a much lighter bike. There's no idler to push, so I find it a lot easier and less taxing to ride around on a big day. This doesn't quite eat the bumps the way that the Range does, but it's, as I said, surprisingly not that far off. So overall, I'm getting on with the bike really well, but there are a few things that I would change if I was designing the bike or making a new version of it. So first of all, Ride 9. You don't need 9 positions for that. I would prefer less. It also does not have any accessory mounts, so if I want to carry a tube or anything like that, I've got to use a strap for the frame. So it'd be nice to have an accessory mount, or even better, like a SWAT box, that kind of thing. It would be great if the head angle was a degree slacker, so I've put an angle set in, but it'd be great to just not have to worry about that. And then, as I mentioned, the seat angle is also not steep enough, so steepen that bad boy up, shorten the top tube, just give you a more comfortable all-day pedaling position. So those gripes aside, really happy with this bike. It's kind of ticking all the boxes that I wanted to tick, in that it's a good race bike. It's allowed me to consolidate 2 bikes, and I like pedaling around all day. Plus, it's still pretty good in the big hits and the harder terrain that I ride. So thanks for watching. Keep an eye out for the ride review video, which I'll get around to at some point, and I'll see you next time.